So, in the world of English language teaching, or ELT as you'll hear it called, there are some really fascinating and honestly pretty fierce debates that shape how millions of us learn. Today, we're going to unpack the biggest questions that teachers and students are grappling with every single day.
It all kicks off with this one fundamental question that I'm sure we've all wondered about. Why is it that a 2-year-old can just soak up a language effortlessly, but as adults, we have to sweat through textbooks and verb charts? I mean, you don't see toddlers with flashcards, right? This single challenge really sets the stage for everything else in language teaching.
And the difference really boils down to this. For a kid, learning a language is totally unconscious. Their brains are literally wired for it. But for us adults, it's a conscious, structured effort. It's like that childhood superpower just fades away, and it forces us to learn in a completely different way. So this huge shift from just absorbing it like air to actually having to work at it, well, that's precisely why teaching English, especially to adults, is so incredibly complex. It's not just about passing along information. It's about helping someone navigate a totally different mental process. Okay, so this core challenge, it creates some major debates that play out in classrooms literally every day. Let's dive into the key questions that every single teacher has to figure out. First up, and this is a big one, should students use their native language, their L1, in the classroom? Is it a helpful tool, or is it just a distraction that gets in the way? This one really divides educators. You can really see two camps on this. On one side, using your first language can be a super helpful bridge, to explain a really complex idea quickly. But on the other hand, it can easily become a crutch that stops learners from really diving in and immersing themselves in English. Finding that perfect balance is the real trick for teachers.
All right, next up, and this one's a classic, teacher talking time. We've all been in that class, right? Where the teacher just talks and talks and talks. But does that actually work? Well, the general thinking in the field is that less is definitely more. Think about it. The more the teacher talks, the less time the students have to practice talking themselves. The big goal is to move away from just telling students the answers and instead eliciting them. Asking the right questions and giving prompts that guide students to figure things out on their own. It's all about creating space for them to use the language. And of course, you knew this was coming. The great grammar debate. Is the secret to fluency really just memorizing a mountain of verb tenses and sentence structures? So what's the verdict? Well, the truth is, there isn't one. For some people, having that clear grammar roadmap is absolutely essential. But for others, it just feels totally abstract and gets in the way of actually speaking. The best approach always depends on the individual student, what their goals are, their learning style, and what they're going to use English for. But these classroom debates, they don't exist in a bubble. So let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger, global trends that are shaping how English is taught and learned all over the world today.
One of the biggest trends out there right now is something called CLIL. It's a fancy acronym for Content and Language Integrated Learning. But the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Language is best learned when it's a tool, not just a subject. So you're not just studying English, you're using English to study something else. It gives the language an immediate purpose.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, think about it. It could mean doing your high school science experiments in English, or learning how to code in English, or maybe debating historical events in English. It makes the language totally relevant and connects it to the real world right away. Okay, here's a wild fact for you. The vast majority of people speaking English in the world today are non-native speakers. That completely flips the script on what the goal of learning is, doesn't it? Are we all trying to sound like we're from London or New York, or should we be embracing a true global English with all its different sounds? One idea that's gaining a lot of traction is this concept of a phonological core. The thinking is, instead of aiming for one specific correct accent, the focus should just be on mastering the key sounds you need to be understood clearly. As long as people can understand you, your accent is just a part of who you are. Now, of course, that opens up a whole new debate about who gets to decide which sounds are essential, but the idea itself, focusing on being understood over just imitating, is a huge shift. So, with all these big ideas and global changes swirling around, what are teachers actually using? Let's talk about the tools of the trade, from the good old-fashioned textbook to the online classroom. The textbook. For so many of us, it's a classic love-hate relationship, right?
On the plus side, it gives you structure, a clear path forward, and that can feel really safe as a learner. But on the downside, they get outdated so fast, and come on, we've all read those super awkward, stilted dialogues that no actual human would ever say.
And that brings us to the reality for so many people now, online learning. And the shift online has brought some huge challenges. Like, how do you keep students engaged when they're just staring at a screen? How do you keep the motivation up without the energy you get from being in a room together? And how in the world do you replicate those spontaneous, off-the-cuff moments that are so important for language practice? These are the puzzles teachers everywhere are still trying to solve.
Okay, so all of this, it brings us to one final, really powerful idea that kind of ties everything together. It's called the glad twice rule, and it might just be the ultimate test of a great class. The phrase itself is super simple, maybe a little weird. Don't make your students glad twice. What on earth could that mean? I mean, don't you want them to be glad they're learning? Okay, here's the secret. You make a student glad twice when they're happy the class is starting, and then they're even happier when it's finally over. It means that somewhere in the middle, the journey, the actual learning, got lost. The real goal is to keep that engagement, that curiosity going from the first minute all the way to the last. So how do you avoid that trap? It really boils down to three key things. First, you have to constantly reflect and check in on what your students really need. Second, you've got to be able to adapt and be flexible with how you teach. And third, use real-world materials that connect what you're learning to actual life. It's all about making the journey itself the rewarding part. And all of this, it leaves us with one last big question to chew on. In a world that's changing faster than ever, with new technology and our lives getting more and more connected globally, what will English teaching even look like in 20 years? As we've seen, the one thing we can count on is that it will keep on changing to meet the needs of our world.